I'm watching the Celtics Hornets game right now, and obviously, the Celtics. This is on, what was it, February 10th? So, you can look up that game. The Hornets are getting blown up by the Celtics, so it's not really interesting, but I don't have a choice because my TV only gets ESPN and NBA TV, so I can't watch my Sixers even if I wanted to. What the reason why I recording this, since the Sixers are playing, I can't watch them, is because, of course, they're talking about Victor Wembanyama because he's Victor Wembanyama, and, if you don't know him, I don't know how you haven't, because they post him everywhere, but it makes me think of the discussion that has been going on online where, I know that some people say it because they like being contrarian to be contrarian, or to contrast to be a contrarian. I don't know the right way to phrase that. But some people are like, oh, he's too injury prone. Those guys are too injury prone. I would take Scoot if I was a GM. And I'm like, but how could you actually? And the reason I say that is because, it's always the same thing. People have talked about it. I think Rusty Buckets talked about this, how what ifs always kind of go one way for a lot of people. And it seems like that's a what if that those contrarians have, is like, well, what if he gets injured, and then kind of project that is going to happen. Where, yes, statistically speaking, it is likely that he'll get injured. Jimmy High Roller made a video about how guys over 7'2" for the most part get injured all the time, and their careers are never that great. And even though they say Victor 7'3", we all know he's closer to 7'4", 7'5". So it is very likely that he will get injured. So it's not like that's an unfound claim. He's had injuries, although nothing too major, except I think there was one foot injury at some point. But otherwise, I think it's the rest of his injury history is pretty okay. So the question to me is, how could you not take him if you're a GM? Because there's no risk for you if you do take him. And what I mean by that is, as Jimmy High Roller said, statistically speaking, those guys get injured. Those guys, almost never pan out to have the careers that, are projected for them. Guys like Ralph Sampson, Boban, more recently Porzingis. None of those really tall guys really are able to get in a groove to have their superstar potential, be realized. At the same time, it's a risk that I think everyone has acknowledged and is okay with because of the opposite of the what if. And that is, if you're a GM and you take Scoot Henderson first, and Victor gets taken second, because he's probably going to get taken, if somehow he doesn't get taken first, he's going to get taken second. If you do that, and he pans out, how would you ever have a job in an NBA front office again? Just straight up. Because if he, becomes Kevin Durant with the defense of Giannis, but at 7'5", which, very high bar, but, just extending an olive branch of the other way, which is that he becomes, like, some people are saying he's going to be a total bust, which seems very hard to believe. I mean, like, bust in the sense of he's not going to be good. He could obviously bust, like, he's not going to be a superstar, but, people are saying he's going to, like, be too injury riddled and be bounced out of the league in 5 years or something. And I'm just like, yeah, that could happen, but if it works out, then, it's like when guys picked Ralph Sampson before Hakeem and Michael Jordan. And it's like, wow, no matter what you do, no matter, however the rest of your career looks, like, you'd have to hit a home run. You'd first have to hit a home run on Scoot, just like how the Rockets hit a home run on Hakeem Olajuwon, because no one cares that the Rockets picked Hakeem over Michael Jordan, because Hakeem worked. So you need to have a home run on Scoot, and you need to have a home run on almost every other draft pick you have, and or win multiple championships with them. Because another example of this, again, as a Philly fan, Jalen Reagor for the Philadelphia Eagles was drafted one pick before Justin Jefferson. And Justin Jefferson is a much, much better wide receiver. And that GM for, a few years, for a couple years, got a lot of flack for his drafting because he picked, honestly, a fifth-round receiver, it feels like, in the first round before a guy who, is on track to have like a Jerry Rice level career, except for maybe championships. So it's a really big mistake. He was able to rectify that a bit by picking some other good guys and making some moves that kind of fixed his reputation with the city. But at the same time, it's hard to overcome something like that, especially in basketball where, you only get so many picks and, which means every pick is amplified, especially when it comes to the first overall pick. Again, Greg Oden versus Kevin Durant. Like, that's another one where, like, that's just what I'm sure that GM is kind of known for. I don't know who the GM of the Trailblazers was at the time. I don't know what he's still doing. But point is, you kind of can't, if there's a guy that's solidly number one, it's really hard to pick against that guy and, what I mean to say is, if there's a guy that's solidly number one, like he has, at least at this point, the most talent in the draft, and you don't pick him, it's really highly scrutinized, and it will be even worse if you don't, if that guy actually works out. And the opposite, like, think about it. The Sixers in 2018 drafted Markelle Fultz first overall, and the Celtics drafted Jason Tatum. And at the time, everyone thought the Celtics were idiots, I guess. An idiot because it's one guy. But still, everyone thought they were dumb, and it was like, why did you trade down and pick a much worse player than Markelle Fultz? Now we know that, Jason Tatum was better than Markelle, or at least, we don't know what happened with Markelle's shoulder. We don't know. But it's one of those things where you think about, again, like the two other draft mistakes that I mentioned, and that draft mistake, the Sixers don't really get much flack for that draft mistake, except by their own fans. Because, of course, we're all upset, like, oh, if only we had Jason Tatum, blah, 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 we would have had a championship, and people are, of course, going to say that because it's like, well, he happened to pan out in this situation, but, if he went to us, he might not have been as good. He might have fallen off. We don't know. But that's the thing. It's like the Sixers fans are upset, but the media won't clown the Sixers for picking the unanimous first guy, the guy who's unanimously first overall. They're not going to clown him for picking him first because it meant everyone else was wrong too. As opposed to if you don't pick the guy I was projected first and he goes second, and then it's like, no, it's only you. It hones in the blame to one person, or like, I guess the person who, really one person, because whoever's making the choices or is most important in making those choices is the one that's going to be in trouble for it. But for the Markelle Fultz situation, it's like, no, everyone thought he was, or at least a lot of the mainstream media thought he's the first overall guy. He's the guy that you can build a franchise around, So it's a weird, not necessarily double standard, I guess, but it's a weird kind of issue that GMs have to deal with that I guess, you're never going to really see that brought up ever. So I just thought it was interesting.